This is a read-through of the Introduction to Mathematical Metaphysics by Christopher Langan. And in this paper, he redefines metaphysics as this logically idempotent metalinguistic identity of reality, which couples two initial ingredients of awareness, perceptual reality on the one hand, and cognitive perceptual syntax, a formalization of mind, on the other hand. And so we're looking at the paper to see what are the main points that are raised to redefine metaphysics and to link the cognitive theoretic model of the universe as the theory and the model that sort of embeds this redefinition of metaphysics. Relational structure. The relational level of mathematical structure is always of crucial importance, especially with regard to connectivity and coherence. Historically, the coherence and connectivity of reality have been impaired by dualism. The parallel distinctions between mind and matter, form and content, attribute and argument, property and substance, language and universe, and so on, are conventionally understood as dualistic, positing a fundamental dissimilarity or separation between two entities whose separation is problematical. These can often be addressed by mapping the dualistic distinction to discernible but coincidental aspects of a single coherent entity, thereby making it a duality and therefore dualic. A similar meta-distinction exists for a three-way distinction, such as between space, time, and object or matter. It can be regarded as either trialistic or trialic. So mathematically, a relation is a bridge between two domains. For example, if you have a relation between two real numbers, then it can be reflected as a function in the plane, for example. And so the plane becomes the space where the relation between the two real numbers exists. And so then the two real numbers, which could be thought of two domains, the domain, the codomain of the function, let's say, now they are part of the same flat 2D plane. So they belong to the same underlying reality, the same domain of reality. They're just a selection of points within a plane. And so the relation, I think, is the same idea here. What is the relation that establishes the connectivity and the coherence of reality? What is the 2D plane, the R2 domain, that relates fundamental different aspects of reality? And so relation is really about connectivity and coherence. In the case of reality, philosophers, when they have defined metaphysics, they have defined mind and matter, form and content, in logic, attribute and argument, in the theory of language, language and universe. And these two domains are not thought to be something that coincides in a single underlying reality. And this is, I guess, problematical. And so the way to resolve it is to say, no, they actually coincide, because you can define a point in R2 that shows that each of the two coordinates of the point are just two dualistic aspects of the same thing. You have the point P1, and you have the two components x1 and y1. And you can say, even though they're not in the same domain, the point, the relation itself, creates this dualism where you can write x1 as f minus 1 of y1, or you can write y1 as f of x1. And so now the entity is dualistic, and there is a way to pass from one to the other. And so the relation itself makes the mapping, and so solve this duality where you have two fundamental components of reality that seem to be irreconcilable. The form is everything that the content is not, right? It's like this, the theory of reality is split. There is on one side the form, on the other side the content. But if you can point to the merging function from which both emerge, then you can sort of present them as two dualistic components of the same thing. So that's what Langan points out, and you have the same way with where there's a three-way distinction, such as space, time, and object or matter. In a similar way, instead of looking at just a relation with two relans, you look at it as a relation with three relans, so space-time object. And space-time object in the CTMU is understood as space are like relations between objects, times are like functions between objects, going from one object to the other through a function. And then you have the objects, which can be regarded as well as particular expression of a relation in space and a function in time. And so all of these components can sort of be expressed in terms of the other, and that's why they are regarded as triadic. For the CTMU, reality as a whole is a syndiffeonic relation. Reality is unified, right? It's a unified identity. And so this concept of relation is really at the foundation of the theorization of the CTMU. And so what it solves and what it speaks about is really this connectivity and coherence. And this connectivity and coherence is solved with the concept of duality or triality, which exhibit the single point of junction where each of the aspects become a dualist or triadic aspect of the same underlying reality. Science proceeds by formal cognitive abstraction of perceptual content, for which it requires just two initial ingredients: perceptual reality, our perceptual relationship with the world of percepts or observable states, and the cognitive apparatus through which perceptual content, as well as the perceptual relationship between percept and percipient, is recognized and processed. Indeed, science can be regarded as the coupling of these two ingredients, and inasmuch as the ingredients are coupled, as an initial ingredient in its own right. Later on, we'll be calling it M. Hence, the above dualisms and their remedial dualities bear heavily on scientific epistemology. The cognitive and perceptual ingredients of reality have structure, and like all relationships, their relationship has structure as well. This structure is that of a syndiffeonic relation. So science is impacted by dualism, but these two aspects are coupled. And so when we think of the connectivity and the coherence of science, we think not only of these two dual aspects, but we think as well of the underlying unity that corresponds to a unity that is dualized into the two aspects of perceptuality and cognitive perceptual syntax. And so science understood as this initial ingredient that gets dualized in perceptual reality and cognitive perceptual syntax, we can call it M. And so M solves the coherence of science. It ties together the abstract equations that we have about the world, the abstract models, the cognitive perceptual syntax on the one hand, and on the other hand, the observations. So M is the key to establish the connectivity and coherence of reality and of science. The mathematical metaphysics rely on the scientific understanding of reality, and so since the understanding of science rely on the understanding of this relation between cognitive and perceptual ingredients of reality, then this syndiffeonic relation, which is sameness and difference, is a critical component to understand the initial ingredient of awareness and how it couples both perceptual reality and the cognitive perceptual syntax. And so this syndiffeonic relation is what grounds the mathematical metaphysics on the connectivity and coherence of reality as a whole that holds science together. And this syndiffeonic relation then becomes the point of entry to understand this cognitivity and coherence as far as science is concerned. And so as far as the scientific definition of metaphysics is concerned, which is exactly what the CTMU proposes. The CTMU suggests to define a mathematical metaphysics, and so a scientific understanding of metaphysics. And so the syndiffeonic relation becomes the key to have the coherence and connectivity of science, and a key to understand this unified M that underlies the coupling of both ingredients of awareness with which we observe and understand and model reality. Syndiffeonesis, the relational structure of reality. Any relationship of scientific interest is recognizable as a relationship, and therefore intelligible. And every intelligible relationship involves the attribution of a property to its instances, i.e., the relationship is attributed to the things related by it. Other ways of saying this are that every intelligible relationship is a syndiffeonic relationship, or equivalently, that syndiffeonesis, the definitive property of syndiffeonic relationships, is the universal relational structure of reality as it is knowable to science. Intelligibility is the attribution of a property to an instance. You have an X which receives a property attributed to X. And so when we say that there is a relationship that is of scientific interest, it is something that is attributed to some group of instances. So when we speak about the relationship of reality, we attribute the relationship of reality to all the instances within reality. And so the relationship is attributed to the things related by it. All of them receive the relationship. That's what it means to have an intelligible relation. So by the structure of intelligibility itself, every relationship is a syndiffeonic relationship, because on the one hand, you have the instances which represent a difference. If you have two instances, then you have two things that are different in some way. But when you look at them together, there is a relationship R that distributes over both instances. And so when you look at both of these instances, and when you look at the relationship between the two of them, you have a syndiffeonesis, because you have two diffeonic instances that reflect sameness in the sense that the same relation is attributed to them. So you always have syndiffeonesis, the difference of instances, and the sameness of the common relation applied to the different instances.